The Cathara had stopped counting the days since their last victory. Commander Zethara pressed her six-fingered hands against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching another transport ship burn in the void. The Devourers had found their convoy again. They always did. How many made it to the inner system? She asked without turning around. Her voice carried the weight of a species facing extinction. 47 ships, Commander. Navigation Officer Teln's whiskers twitched with barely controlled fear. We lost 112 in the ambush. Zethara closed her large, dark eyes. Each ship held thousands of civilians. The last free Cathara fleeing from world to world as the Devourers consumed everything in their path. For 8 cycles, they had run. For 8 cycles, they had watched their people die. The Devourers were not like other enemies. They didn't want territory or resources. They wanted to consume every living thing in the galaxy, converting all organic matter into more of themselves. They had already eaten 17 species entirely. The Cathara would be the 18th. Commander, we're receiving distress calls from the mining stations on Keth 7, Communications Officer Vren reported. The Devourers have broken through the outer defenses. Another world lost. Another few million Cathara who would never see tomorrow's sun. Zethara had been a brilliant military strategist once. She had won battles that other commanders called impossible. But how do you fight an enemy that grows stronger with every victory? How do you defeat creatures that turn your own dead against you? Set course for the deep void, she commanded. We'll try to reach the emergency shelters in the Kepler Drift. Commander, Teln hesitated. The shelters only have supplies for half our remaining population. I know. The words tasted bitter. Signal the civilian ships. Prepare for emergency rationing protocols. As her crew worked to implement another desperate measure, Zethara stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was still debating how to respond to the Devourer threat. They had been debating for 6 cycles while entire species died. The Elthari offered thoughts and prayers. The Zentari promised aid that never came. The Crystalline Collective claimed they needed more time to analyze the situation. Only the Kithara had actually fought. Only they had bled and died trying to stop the advancing darkness. And now they were losing. Commander, Vren's voice cracked with excitement. I'm picking up an unknown signal on the emergency frequencies. It's not Cathara. Zethara spun around. Devourers? No, ma'am. The signal pattern is completely different. It's structured, organized, almost like... He paused, checking his instruments again. Like a military transmission. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice unlike anything they had heard before. It was deep, confident, speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation warship Indomitable. We're receiving your distress signals and moving to intercept. What's your situation? The bridge fell silent. Zethara felt her heart skip a beat. Terran? She had heard that word before, in old star charts and ancient databases. Terra was a small world in the outer spiral, populated by a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. What could they possibly do against the Devourers? This is Commander Zethara of the Cathara Republic, she replied finally. We are under pursuit by hostile forces. Our situation is critical. Copy that, Commander. Can you provide tactical data on these hostile forces? Zethara almost laughed. Tactical data? What good would that do? Captain Chen, I appreciate your concern, but the threat we face is beyond what your people can handle. The Devourers have consumed 17 species. They cannot be reasoned with or defeated through conventional warfare. This 40, it's reasoned with Kramant. There was a pause, then the human voice came back, somehow even more determined than before. Ma'am, with respect, we didn't come all this way to turn around at the first sign of trouble. The Federation doesn't abandon people in need. You don't understand, Zethara pressed. These creatures adapt to every weapon, every tactic. They turn our own dead against us. We have been fighting them for 8 cycles, and we're losing. Badly. Commander, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is, you're right, this does sound like a tough fight. The good news is that Terrans have a saying, the tougher the fight, the more we dig in our heels. Navigation Officer Teln was frantically checking his sensors. Commander, I'm detecting a massive energy signature dropping out of hyperspace. It's enormous. On the main screen, space itself seemed to tear open as something massive forced its way through the fabric of reality. The ship that emerged defied everything Zethara thought she knew about starship design. It was angular, aggressive, covered in weapons arrays that looked more like instruments of war than tools of exploration. Most ships were built for efficiency or beauty. This one was built to kill. Terran Warship Indomitable, now in system, Captain Chen's voice announced. Commander Zethara, we're reading multiple hostile contacts on long-range sensors. Moving fast in your direction. How long until they reach your position? 2 hours, maybe less. Zethara replied, still staring at the human warship. Captain, you need to leave. Now. One ship cannot stand against the Devourers. You'll only be adding your crew to their numbers. Negative, Commander. We're here to help. And we don't run from fights. There was something in the human's tone that reminded Zethara of her own voice from years ago, when she still believed in victory. Can you provide detailed information about enemy capabilities and numbers? Zethara looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at her, hope beginning to flicker in their eyes for the first time in cycles. She couldn't crush that hope, even though she knew how this would end. The brave humans would fight, and they would die, and then the Devourers would be that much stronger. Very well, Captain. The enemy force consists of approximately 200 vessels of various sizes. They are biological constructs, capable of rapid adaptation and regeneration. They convert defeated enemies into additional units. Standard energy weapons lose effectiveness quickly as they develop resistance. Kinetic weapons work longer, but eventually become useless as well. What about close-range combat? Boarding actions? Zethara's whiskers drooped. Suicide. The Devourers excel at personal combat. They've assimilated the fighting techniques of every species they've encountered. Interesting. Commander, I'm going to send over some technical data about our defensive capabilities. I'd appreciate your input on optimal positioning for the coming engagement. Technical data? Zethara accepted the transmission and immediately felt her legs go weak. The power readings from the human ship were impossible. No vessel that size could generate that much energy. The weapon systems were completely unlike anything in her databases, exotic technologies she had never seen before. Captain Chen, she said slowly, these specifications, how is this possible? Let's just say humans have a knack for making big things go boom. The human's voice carried a hint of dark humor. Commander, I need your civilian ships to move to coordinates I'm transmitting. We're going to make our stand here. Here? Zethara looked at the tactical display. They were in empty space. No terrain advantages. No defensive positions. Captain, wouldn't it be better to fall back to, Commander, with respect, running hasn't been working out for you so far. The human's voice was gentle but firm. Sometimes the best defense is a really, really good offense. As the human ship moved into position, Zethara watched her sensor readings in amazement. The Terran vessel's movements were precise, calculated, like a predator choosing the perfect spot for an ambush. But against the Devourers, it would be a slaughter. Enemy contacts now 90 minutes out, Teln reported. Captain Chen's voice came over the comm again. Commander, I want to share something with you. Where I come from, there's an old military saying, the enemy gets a vote. Every battle plan assumes the other guy is going to do exactly what you expect. But humans learned a long time ago that the secret to winning isn't having the perfect plan. Then what is it? Zethara found herself asking despite her despair. It's being better at adapting when the plan falls apart. And lady, we've had a lot of practice at making things up as we go along. The main display showed the approaching Devourer fleet, a dark cloud of organic ships that moved like a single, hungry organism. Zethara had seen this sight too many times before. In 1 hour, that beautiful human ship would be torn apart, its crew consumed, and the darkness would grow stronger. But for the first time in cycles, she found herself hoping she was wrong. All Cathara ships, move to the coordinates Captain Chen provided, she ordered. Let's see what these Terrans are made of. As her ships took their positions behind the human warship, Zethara noticed something else on her sensors. The Terran vessel was powering up systems that didn't appear on any of her technical databases. Whatever the humans were planning, they had kept some secrets. 60 minutes to contact, Teln reported. Commander, came Captain Chen's voice one more time. You should know something. Humans have a really bad habit of showing up uninvited to fights where we're not supposed to win. There was a pause. And when she spoke again, her voice carried something that made Zethara's fur stand on end. We've got quite a track record of spoiling other people's parties. On the sensor display, the human ship continued its mysterious preparations. Energy signatures unlike anything in galactic databases pulsed through its hull. Whatever the humans were about to do, it was going to be spectacular. Zethara just hoped some of them would survive to see it. The countdown continued. 50 minutes, 45. The Devourers came on like inevitable death, as they always had. But something was different this time. Something had changed. For the first time in 8 cycles, the Cathara were not running. They were making a stand. And they were not alone. 30 minutes to contact, Teln whispered. Zethara gripped her command chair and watched the impossible human ship prepare for war. Maybe, just maybe, salvation would thunder out of the abyss after all. The Devourers dropped out of hyperspace in a formation that had terrorized the galaxy for 8 cycles. 200 ships of living metal and twisted flesh moved as one organism, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with hungry life. They had expected to find scattered refugees fleeing in panic. As always, instead, they found something waiting for them. Contact in 15 minutes, Navigation Officer Teln reported, his voice tight with fear. Commander, they're not slowing down. Zethara watched the tactical display, her heart's hammering. The Devourers never slowed down. They didn't need to study their prey or plan complex strategies. They simply overwhelmed through sheer numbers and their terrible ability to adapt. Captain Chen, she called over the comm. The enemy formation is standard for them. They'll try to surround us and overwhelm through coordinated attack. Once they're close, they'll begin adaptation protocols. Copy that, Commander. Question. How long does this adaptation usually take? Minutes, sometimes less. Captain, please reconsider your position. Your ship is powerful, but against 200 vessels. Ma'am, I appreciate the concern. But you're thinking like every other species they've fought. Captain Chen's voice carried calm confidence that seemed impossible given the circumstances. See, there's something you need to understand about humans. We didn't become the apex predator on our world by being the strongest or the fastest. On the display, the human warship began to move, not retreating, but advancing directly toward the center of the Devourer formation. Captain, what are you doing? Zethara gasped. We became apex predators by being mean, stubborn, and really, really creative. The Terran ship's energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible. All ships. This is Captain Chen. Today we're going to show these things something they've never seen before. A species that fights dirtier than they do. The Devourer fleet spread into their classic envelopment pattern, organic ships flowing like water around their prey. Zethara had seen this maneuver destroy entire battle fleets. The enemy would surround their target, then collapse inward like a closing fist. But the human ship didn't try to escape the trap. Instead, it dove straight toward the largest Devourer vessel, a massive bioship the size of a small moon. Its surface writhed with weapon pods and sensory organs, all focused on the approaching Terran warship. 5 minutes to engagement range, Teln whispered. Captain Chen, They're going to surround you, Zethara warned. That's the plan, Commander. See? Every species they've fought has tried to stay away from them. Fight at range. Avoid getting trapped. But there's an old human saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. The human ship began broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. But it wasn't a surrender demand or a final message. It was music. Loud, aggressive human music with a driving beat that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the warship's weapons charging. What is that? Communications, Officer Vren asked in bewilderment. That, Captain Chen replied, is thunderstruck by AC/DC. It's traditional for humans to play music when we're about to do something incredibly stupid and dangerous. The largest Devourer vessel opened fire first, streams of bioplasma and living projectiles racing toward the human ship. Zethara held her breath, expecting to see the Terran vessel torn apart. Instead, the human ship seemed to dance. It moved unlike any starship Zethara had ever seen, rolling and spinning through three-dimensional space as if gravity and inertia were merely suggestions. The alien weapons passed harmlessly through space where the ship had been moments before. How are they moving like that? Teln gasped. But that was just the beginning. The human ship returned fire, and Zethara's sensor readings went completely insane. The weapons the Terrans were using didn't appear in any database. Streams of accelerated particles moving at significant fractions of light speed. Exotic energy beams that seemed to ignore conventional shielding. And something else, projectiles that moved too slowly to be effective until they got close to their targets and suddenly accelerated to impossible velocities. The first Devourer ship to be hit simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was expanding plasma and debris. Impossible, Zethara breathed. They destroyed a Devourer vessel in one shot. Not destroyed, Captain Chen corrected. But the Devourers were already responding. The remaining ships began to shift their formations, their hulls morphing as they attempted to develop defenses against the new weapons. This was their greatest strength, the ability to adapt to any threat within minutes. They're adapting, Captain, Zethara warned. You need to change tactics immediately. Already on it, Commander. See, that's the thing about humans. We learned something important, fighting each other for thousands of years. The best weapon is the one your enemy isn't expecting. The human ship's weapon systems completely changed. Instead of the exotic energy beams, it began firing what looked like simple kinetic projectiles. But these weren't normal slugs. They were moving at relativistic speeds. And when they struck Devourer ships, the results were catastrophic. How many different weapon systems does that ship have? Zethara asked in amazement. Classified, Captain Chen replied with obvious humor. But let's just say humans have always been really good at finding new ways to break things. The Devourer fleet was in chaos now. Every time they began to adapt to one weapon system, the humans switched to something completely different. Particle beams became kinetic slugs. Kinetic slugs became some kind of gravitational distortion weapon that crushed ships from the inside out. Gravitational weapons became streams of antimatter that turned anything they touched into pure energy. This is impossible, one of Zethara's tactical officers whispered. No ship can carry that many different weapon systems. Unless, Zethara said slowly, unless they built a ship specifically designed for fighting adaptable enemies. The human warship was now in the middle of the Devourer formation, surrounded by enemies on all sides. By all tactical logic, it should have been overwhelmed and destroyed. Instead, it was carving through the enemy fleet like a blade through cloth. But the Devourers weren't giving up. The remaining ships began to coordinate their attacks, trying to overwhelm even the human vessel's incredible defenses. Bioplasma filled space as 200 alien ships focused their fire on a single target. Captain, you're taking heavy fire, Zethara warned, watching her sensors spike as energy readings climbed to dangerous levels. Nothing we can't handle, came the reply. But she could hear strain in the human's voice for the first time. Though I'll admit, these things pack quite a punch. The Devourer fleet began to change tactics again. If they couldn't adapt to the human weapons fast enough, they would try to overwhelm through sheer volume of fire. Every ship in their fleet opened up simultaneously, creating a web of deadly energy that no ship should have been able to survive. The human vessel's shields flared and sparked, finally beginning to show damage. Warning lights flickered across Zethara's displays as the Terran ship's energy signatures fluctuated wildly. "Their shields are failing," Teln reported. "Captain Chen, you need to withdraw." "Negative, Commander. We're not done here yet." There was something in the human's voice now. Not fear, but anticipation. Besides, humans have another old saying. It's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's about the size of the fight in the dog. The human ship suddenly stopped evading. Instead, it turned toward the largest cluster of devourer vessels and began to accelerate directly at them. Its remaining weapons fired continuously, creating a corridor of destruction through the enemy formation. "What is she doing?" Zethara demanded. "Something humans call a ramming attack," Captain Chen explained calmly. "See, the thing about human military doctrine is that we always have a plan B. And plan B is usually, when in doubt, hit them with something heavy. You can't ram them. Your ship will be destroyed." "Not necessarily." The human ship's energy readings suddenly spiked again. But this time it was different. Instead of weapons charging, it was something else entirely. "Commander, you might want to have your ships move back a few thousand kilometers. Things are about to get a little warm out here." Zethara didn't question the order. She had seen enough to know that humans apparently specialized in the impossible. "All ships, emergency retreat! Move back immediately!" As the Kithara vessels pulled back, the human warship reached the center of the Devourer formation. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. Then, Captain Chen's voice came over the comm. "One last time, for anyone keeping score at home. This is what humans call improvising." The human ship exploded, but it wasn't destruction. It was transformation. The vessel's hull split open like a flower, revealing something that defied everything Zethara thought she knew about starship design. The single ship had been concealing dozens of smaller vessels inside it, each one launching in a different direction, at incredible speed. "Modular design," Captain Chen explained, her voice now coming from one of the smaller ships. "The Indomitable isn't one ship. She's 50 ships pretending to be one, and now we're everywhere at once." The Devourer fleet found itself in the middle of a three-dimensional nightmare. 50 human vessels, each one fast and heavily armed, attacked from every angle simultaneously. The enemy's adaptation protocols couldn't keep up with the sheer variety of attacks coming from all directions. But the humans weren't done yet. Each of the smaller vessels began broadcasting, targeting data to the others, coordinating their attacks with inhuman precision. When one ship found a weakness in a Devourer's defenses, all the others immediately exploited it. "They're fighting like a hive mind," one of Zethara's officers observed in amazement. "Not a hive mind," Zethara corrected, finally beginning to understand. "A pack. They're hunting." The Devourer fleet, which had seemed invincible just minutes before, was being systematically torn apart. Their adaptation abilities meant nothing when faced with 50 different ships using 50 different tactics, all coordinated but constantly changing. "Commander Zethara," Captain Chen called. "You and your people might want to take notes. We're about to show you how humans deal with bullies." As she watched the impossible battle unfold, Zethara felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 cycles of running and hiding. She felt hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, the darkness could be beaten after all. The Devourers had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that humans would fight like every other species they had encountered. They had expected fear, desperation, and predictable tactics. Instead, they had found humans, and humans, as it turned out, fought like nothing else in the galaxy. The Devourer fleet was dying, but they were not finished. As their numbers dwindled, the surviving ships began to demonstrate why they had consumed 17 species. They stopped trying to adapt to human weapons, and instead focused on their most dangerous ability, conversion. "Commander." "Communications." Officer Vren's voice cracked with panic. The Devourers are releasing spores into space. They're trying to infect any nearby organic matter. Zethara watched in horror as clouds of biomatter erupted from the dying alien ships. This was how the Devourers had turned so many victories into defeats. Even when their vessels were destroyed, they could still claim their enemies by converting them into new Devourer units. "Captain Chen, you need to retreat immediately," she called over the comm. "Those spores will convert any organic matter they touch. Your crew will be turned against you." There was a pause before the human captain responded. And when she did, there was something almost like amusement in her voice. "Commander, I think it's time we shared something important about humans. We're not entirely organic." "What do you mean?" "I mean that by the time humans developed interstellar travel, we had learned to improve ourselves. Enhanced immune systems, reinforced skeletal structures, improved neural pathways, redundant organ systems. We're still human, but we're human plus." On the tactical display, the human ships continued their assault, apparently unaffected by the spreading biospores. But that wasn't the most surprising part. The surprising part was that wherever the spores encountered human technology, they simply died. "How is that possible?" Zethara breathed. "Nanotechnology," Captain Chen explained. "Every surface of every human ship is covered in microscopic machines designed to break down hostile biological agents. We learned the hard way to be prepared for biological warfare." "You learned the hard way?" "Commander, humans spent most of their early history trying to kill each other. We got really good at it. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. If it could kill efficiently, we invented it. Then we invented counters to it. Then counters to the counters. The remaining Devourer ships were now releasing everything they had. Bioplasma, conversion spores, living weapons that writhed through space like serpents. It was the concentrated nightmare of 8 cycles of galactic terror, all focused on 50 small human vessels. And the humans were laughing. Actual laughter was coming over the comm channels as the human pilots called out targets and coordinated their attacks. They sounded like they were enjoying themselves. "Contacts to the starboard, Sarah," one pilot called. "Big ugly thing with too many teeth." "I see it, Mike. Want to try the new toy?" "Oh hell yes." Zethara watched as one of the human ships fired something she had never seen before. It looked like a small missile, but when it reached its target, it didn't explode. Instead, it burrowed into the Devourer vessel's hull and began to eat it from the inside out. "Self-replicating nanomachines," Captain Chen explained casually. "We call them gray goo weapons. Normally we don't use them because they're considered excessively cruel. But for the Devourers, we'll make an exception." "Excessively cruel?" Zethara was beginning to understand that humans might be more dangerous than she had imagined. The nanomachines don't just destroy the ship. They convert all the material into more nanomachines. Very efficient, but it means the target essentially gets eaten alive at the molecular level. Most species consider it a war crime. And the Devourers, well, they've been doing the same thing to entire civilizations for cycles, so we figure turnabout is fair play. The gray goo weapons spread from ship to ship through the Devourer fleet. Where they hit, the alien vessels simply dissolved, their biomechanical hulls converted into clouds of microscopic machines that immediately began seeking new targets. But even as their fleet died around them, the Devourers had one last card to play. The largest remaining vessel, a command ship the size of a space station, began to undergo a massive transformation. Its hull split open to reveal something that made Zethara's blood freeze. "Dear ancestors," she whispered. "It's a harvester." The thing emerging from the command ship was the stuff of nightmares across 17 extinct species. A harvester was part ship, part creature, part living weapon. It was what the Devourers created when they needed to consume an entire planet quickly. This one was larger than any harvester that had been reported before. "Now that's what I call a target-rich environment," came Captain Chen's voice, still impossibly calm. "Captain, you don't understand," Zethara called desperately. "A harvester can consume entire continents. Its weapons can crack planets. You have to run, Commander, I'm going to let you in on a little secret about human military doctrine. The 50 human ships began to converge on the massive creature, looking like insects attacking a giant. We have a technical term for targets that big and scary. What term? Tuesday. The Harvester opened fire with weapons that could sterilize worlds. Beams of concentrated destruction lashed out toward the human ships, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a small moon. None of them hit. The human vessels moved through the deadly barrage like they were dancing, their movements coordinated but unpredictable. They flowed around the massive creature's attacks, like water around stones, getting closer with each passing second. How are you doing this? Zethara demanded. Predictive algorithms, Captain Chen replied. See? The thing about really big weapons is that they're usually not very fast to aim. We've been tracking this thing's targeting pattern since it emerged. Our computers are now predicting where it's going to shoot 3 seconds before it fires. 3 seconds? That's an eternity in a dogfight, Commander. Long enough to not be there when the shooting starts. The human ships reached optimal range and opened fire simultaneously. But instead of using their exotic weapons, they were using something much simpler. Kinetic projectiles, accelerated to tremendous velocities. You're using bullets? Zethara couldn't believe it. Not bullets, Commander. Bullets are small. These are more like telephone poles made of depleted uranium, moving at 90% of light speed. The relativistic slugs struck the Harvester and punched completely through its biomechanical structure. The creature screamed, actually screamed, as holes the size of buildings appeared in its hull. But it didn't stop fighting. Instead, it began to regenerate, its living tissue flowing to seal the wounds. It's healing, Zethara reported. Not for long, Captain Chen replied grimly. Mike, deploy the Sunday special. With pleasure, Captain. One of the human ships broke formation and dove straight toward the Harvester's core. As it approached, it began to glow with an energy signature that made Zethara's sensors scream warnings. What are you doing? She called. Something we really shouldn't, Captain Chen admitted. But desperate times call for measures that violate several interstellar treaties. The glowing human ship reached the Harvester's core and detonated. But it wasn't a normal explosion. Space itself seemed to twist and writhe around the detonation point, reality bending in ways that hurt to look at. Antimatter warhead, wrapped in a localized space-time distortion field, Captain Chen explained as the Harvester began to collapse in on itself. Technically, it's a weapon of mass destruction, so we're not supposed to use it in inhabited systems. But since this system was already uninhabited, the Harvester imploded, its massive structure folding into a point of twisted space-time before vanishing entirely. The remaining Devourer ships, suddenly cut off from their command vessel, began to flee in all directions. Let them go, Captain Chen ordered as her pilots moved to pursue. They'll spread the word. Sometimes it's better to have a few survivors to tell the story. As the human ships reformed their formation, Zethara realized that the impossible had happened. The Devourers, the unstoppable force that had consumed 17 species, had been defeated. Not just defeated, but utterly destroyed by 50 human vessels that had pretended to be one ship. Captain Chen, she said, her voice shaking with emotion she couldn't quite name. How is any of this possible? Commander, the thing you have to understand about humans is that we're basically the galaxy's most successful predator species. We didn't get that way by being nice or fair or reasonable. The human's voice carried a weight of years and hard-won experience. We got that way by being adaptable, stubborn, and absolutely ruthless when something threatens what we care about. And what do you care about? People, Commander. All people. Human, Cathara. Whatever. We've learned the hard way that civilization is precious and fragile, and sometimes it needs people willing to do terrible things to protect it. The human ships were already beginning to disperse, some heading toward the fleeing Devourer vessels to track their movements, others moving to assist the Cathara convoy with repairs and medical aid. This isn't over, Captain Chen continued. The Devourers have other fleets, other harvesters. But they know now that they're not invincible. And more importantly, the galaxy knows it too. Zeth-Ara looked out at her people's ships, at the survivors who had been ready to give up all hope just hours before. They were moving with purpose now, their despair replaced by something she hadn't seen in cycles. Determination. "What happens now?" she asked. Now we get to work. The Federation is going to need allies for what's coming. Turns out the Devourers aren't the only threat out there, and humans have learned that some fights are too big to handle alone. You want our help? Commander, your people have been fighting an impossible war for 8 cycles and never gave up. That's exactly the kind of stubborn courage we're going to need. Captain Chen's voice carried genuine respect. Besides, humans have another old saying. It's better to have scary friends than scary enemies. As the human vessels prepared to escort the Cathara convoy to safety, Zeth-Ara felt something she hadn't experienced since the war began. She felt like her people might have a future after all. "Captain," she said finally, "what's the Terran Federation's position on revenge? Our official position?" There was definitely humor in the human's voice now. "The Federation believes in proportional response and measured retaliation. And your unofficial position? Nobody messes with our friends." Commander Zeth-Ara looked out at the debris field where an entire Devourer fleet had been utterly destroyed. Then at the human ships that had made it possible. For 8 cycles, her people had run from the darkness, convinced that salvation would never come. They had been wrong. Salvation hadn't come quietly or gently. It had thundered out of the abyss, with 50 ships full of stubborn, creative, absolutely terrifying humans who apparently considered fighting impossible odds to be something they did for fun. And for the first time since the war began, Zeth-Ara was looking forward to tomorrow. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening humanity's friends. It was going to be educational, and probably very loud.